If you've run any ad campaigns on the Facebook ads platform, you've probably noticed that shortly after launch or after you make a change, your ads will enter what's called the learning phase. Now, depending on who you're listening to about online advertising, some people think that this is a status to be avoided at all costs. Other people think it's just the cost of doing business. Now, without taking any sort of polarizing approach or anything like that, we really just want to demystify the learning phase. So in this video, we're going to talk about what the learning phase is and talk about the impacts that it has on your ad account. Let's start off by talking about what the learning phase actually is. And the learning phase is a period of time when Facebook still has quite a lot to learn about your campaign, ad set, and your ads. It's trying to figure out the best way to serve your ads to your target audience to get the results that you're trying to see depending on the campaign objective, the ad group optimization event, the bidding strategies you've set. All of these different things Facebook is trying to figure out in the learning phase. It's no secret that Facebook uses lots of machine learning when it's trying to serve your ads. So the learning phase is just when that machine learning is getting up to speed, gathering data, and figuring things out. During that time period, even though it's a little uncomfortable, you can expect to see less stable performance, and on average, you're probably going to have a worse cost per result than what you will after you exit the learning phase. What they mean by less stable is that you might have some days that are a little bit lower, some days that are excellent, some days that get a little bit worse, fluctuate around a little bit. Basically, you're not really seeing a normal baseline performance. And notice they don't say worse cost per result than what your cost cap or what your CPL goals are. They just say worse, meaning when you're in the learning phase, you can expect that your performance will be worse than when you are not in the learning phase. So when do we actually enter this stage? As I already mentioned in the intro, that happens when a new campaign, ad set, or ads are created, as well as a number of different significant changes are made to an existing ad set, ad, or campaign. Now, the phrase significant change is a very fuzzy statement, but luckily Facebook's actually given us a list of changes that are considered significant. At the campaign level, if you make a budget or a bid amount change, depending on the magnitude you see here, you could end up back in the learning phase for that campaign. Now, what they mean by depending on magnitude leans into one of the common best practices for making adjustments on Facebook to your bid or budget. Don't adjust any bid or budget more than 20% of what the previous day's bid or budget was. So if you have a budget of $100 and you want to average that up to be a budget of $200, you need to make incremental 20% changes day over day until you get there. So your first day, you would go from $100 to $120. The next day, you could go up to $144. The day after that, you could get to $173-ish. And then you'll average your way up to the $200 mark in daily increments until you get there. Making any larger changes than that, let's say you just jumped from $100 to $200, is probably going to be considered a magnitude enough that your campaign will be shifted back into the learning phase. The same would be true if you changed your bid strategy for your campaign. As you can see here, there's no caveat around depending on magnitude. So any change to your bid strategy is almost certainly going to throw you back into the learning phase. Again, because the machine has to figure out how to deliver your results to your target audience to achieve the goals that you have with this new bid strategy. Down below, under the ads section, you can see that any change can be significant and send you into the learning phase. Now, in my experience, that doesn't mean that every change in your ads will send you back into the learning phase, especially not for your entire ad group or campaign, but it likely will take effect on that ad, at least for a short period of time, till Facebook figures out what's been adjusted and how it can start serving that ad more effectively. At the ad set level, any adjustments to your targeting, placements, optimization event, as you can see here, adding new creative, which seems a little silly considering there's an ads column over there on the left, or adjustments to the bid strategy can cause you to go back into the learning phase. Bid and budget amounts are going to be the same. We've already talked about that a bit. This last one, pausing your ad set for over 7 days, can cause Facebook to lose the recency of the performance and the audience patterns that it's been seeing and put it all the way back to the beginning. Now, that doesn't mean that it'll take as long as it did to exit the learning phase the first time, but every time you pause something in your campaigns, probably makes sense for you to try and limit that to only a couple days if possible. But if you really need to pull down spending, if possible, try really limiting the budget rather than pausing. Granted, that might throw you back into the learning phase there, but in my experience, the adjustments to budget are a little bit easier to overcome than pausing things for a certain period of time. So now that we've talked about what puts you into the learning phase, how do you exit the learning phase? At what point do you get out of it and resume normal performance? According to Facebook, performance is considered normal after 50 conversion events are tracked since the last significant edit. So any of those edits we saw on the last slide, all of those are considered significant. Once you've reached 50 conversion events after that, you're going to be out of the learning phase. So it's a pretty easy barrier to keep in mind, but depending on your account size and your experience with Facebook and how they can optimize for your conversion events, you might be asking, what if I don't meet the requirements to exit the learning phase? And at that point, your status will not say learning, it will say learning limited. That means there's simply not enough volume for you to exit the learning phase, but that Facebook has spent a decent amount of time already trying to learn, and it considers it kind of past its prime. It's just relegating you to a different category to where you're likely not going to ever exit the learning phase with the settings that you have in place. So what can cause that? Having lots of account segmentation. Let's say you have 3 different lookalike audiences that you're trying to target, and you have them all in different ad sets, all targeting the exact same ad creative. Now, while that might feel great from a marketer standpoint where you can see the performance of each individual audience, that might cause you to have to segment your budget 3 ways, meaning that not only are the 3 individual audiences smaller than they would be if they were one large audience, which is the 4th bullet point down there, but also now you have your budget segmented 3 ways, the 2nd bullet point, rather than just one collective budget. All of these different segmentations can cause issues, especially if they're not necessary. Now, if you really need to have things segmented in your campaigns by audience, by budget, by location, any of that, absolutely stick with it. The learning phase and learning limited are not a death nail, and you can see good performance with them. It's just a little bit more difficult. The other ones we haven't talked about are low bid or cost cap, meaning that you're just not getting aggressive enough for Facebook to have enough volume to learn and optimize from. Or the last one on here, infrequent conversion event. Unfortunately, just like every other platform, the ideal is going to be 50 conversion events per week per the action that you want to have. Now that, again, is not necessarily attainable for everybody, but if you aren't meeting some of these different benchmarks, you're going to have a hard time. So if you find yourself in that situation, maybe you're optimizing for purchase, but you're not getting as many as you need, might make sense for you to start using an event just one step up the buyer funnel and see if that helps out. Maybe you're going to go to a start checkout, or you're going to go all the way up to an add to cart, something like that. It doesn't hurt to test different optimization events, especially if it leads to better machine learning, which can eventually lead to better performance. Now, with all that said, is the learning phase bad? Absolutely not. It's not a bad thing to be in the learning phase. It is a necessary part of doing business on Facebook. But even as Facebook says, you're not going to have consistent performance, and your results are likely going to be less efficient, or as they said, worse cost per result than you would have if you were not in the learning phase. So like I said, while you can absolutely survive on learning limited or constantly being in the learning phase, there are some things to do to try and get out of the learning phase as much as possible and leverage that good machine learning that Facebook has. Those lean right back into some of the problems that we talked about earlier. Limit that segmentation when you can. Make sure that your audiences are large enough and that you have a big enough budget. Be strategic with your account changes. If you can have the order of magnitude be smaller and make multiple small adjustments, that might be better than one big one. Or just be strategic with how you're trying to make the changes to your campaigns. Lastly, choose a conversion event that has enough volume that Facebook can learn quickly, iterate fast, and get you out of the learning phase so you can get into more normal account performance much more quickly. Overall, the learning phase is going to be something that everybody has to deal with, but those who minimize their time in the learning phase are probably going to see better results on average than those who constantly put themselves back in the learning phase or who are stuck in learning limited. If you have any additional questions about the learning phase or anything else on Facebook, leave us a note in the comments below. Thanks for watching our video. We really appreciate it. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up below. If you really liked it, maybe think about subscribing to the Paid Media Pros YouTube channel and you'll get alerted every time a new video drops.
If you really liked it, you can help support the channel by checking out some of the t-shirts that we're wearing on our merch shelf, as well as looking at the Super Thanks button.